Welcome, petals. If your life revolves around flowers, this is the podcast for you. Biggest mistakes you made. Just pick one if you want.
I was going to say, how long have you got? I think when I think back, there were two things. One of which is I made the classic mistake, and I, of all people, should really give myself a good slapping around this, is not having the clear view about where the customers are going to buy the flowers. It's kind of classic. You know, I fell into I know, I will build it. They will come.
Before we dive in, we welcome Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers as our Season 3 sponsor. Blooming in New Zealand since 1992, they're a vibrant, modern wholesale business, bringing premium hand-selected blooms to florists and retailers nationwide. Hello, petals, and welcome back to the podcast Flower Farming in New Zealand. I'm your host, Jo Robinson, a flower farmer from Central Otago, and today my guest is Julie Treanor, a flower farmer from Kaitoki in the Upper Hutt region. Now, to give a point of reference to our international audience, Kaitoki is close to Wellington and Central Otago is relatively close to Queenstown. Now, Julie wears a lot of different hats, but today she talks to us as a flower farmer, a business coach, and as the co-founder of New Zealand's own flower farmer mentoring program, the Floral Business Activator. Welcome, Julie. Great to have you here.
Well, thanks, Jo. That sounds impressive when you say it like that, but I wouldn't necessarily think of myself in that way. But yes, that's me in a nutshell. Thank you.
Now, before we get into the business coaching and the FBA and all those kind of things, a little bit about your personal journey towards flower farming. How did you first get into it?
I think flowers have been kind of part of my gardening life for as long as I've gardened, and that's for a very long time. But when it comes to growing cut flowers for sale, I think it really started when two things happened at once, one of which I was having something of a professional existential crisis. I was transitioning from working as a leadership and business coach in a particular company to going out on my own. And that's, for anybody that's gone out on their own in any form of business will know what that is like. But at the same time, I came across a book called The Flower Farmer's Year by Georgie Newbury.
Georgie, yep.
And so that was my first exposure to this thing called flower farming. So I started to look at my own garden, a 12 by 12 meter potager area, which is where I grew vegetables, had companion plants in there. And I started to think about, well, how could I put more cut flowers in and create a cut flower garden? And then started to think about, well, how could I create a business? So those two things really collided. I was having a bit of a tough time professionally, if you like, trying to figure out where to go next, at the same time as thinking, well, oh my gosh, there's this opportunity. But the funny thing is, Jo, is that I think the seed for something growing wise has been planted many years ago. On my 40th birthday, I got given a book called The Ripening Sun by a woman called Patricia Atkinson, who wrote about her journey to moving from the UK to the Dordogne and becoming a winemaker, basically. And it was such an inspiring story. I thought, that's what I want my life to be like. But I wanted to be a olive grower in Andalucía in Spain. And here I am in New Zealand growing flowers for a living now. So make of that what you will.
Circuitous route to getting you the joy from growing flowers. So what was your original vision for the business when you started flower farming?
To be brutally honest, I didn't have like a clear vision about what it was. Why. All I started to think about was, how can I incorporate A, more flowers in my garden, B, how can I incorporate what flowers bring to you. Flowers are a brilliant vehicle in which to take people away from their life and try to think about things differently. So I didn't want to teach people how to grow flowers. It was just the flowers, the garden setting, the opportunity for that to be a place to reflect, and then maybe, do some flower arranging. So that was where it started. But it really hasn't kind of turned out that way, in the sense of I'm doing that for coaching clients. But I think what has happened clearly is I brought my coaching life into the flower farming world, which is where the FBA came about. But that wasn't my original idea or notion.
Yeah. Okay. We'll talk a lot more about the FBA in a minute, but it's just really interesting to get this backstory, because you've got the experience of flower farming to take to the mentoring that you do. You're not teaching someone to suck eggs, if that's the best way of putting it.
Well, you've known me almost from the beginning of all of this, Jo. In the FBA sense, what I do is completely different to where I started. And I get a little bit annoyed about people who put themselves up as an expert and say flower farming should be done in this way, because it just doesn't work like that in my experience. It's something that changes and evolves and is so unique.
Yes.
Not just to climate conditions and growing conditions, but just people as people.
Life. Personal choices that you make, just the way you operate your life and your business and your land. I just couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about people realising their own uniqueness of their property and their product, but getting people to realise that there is not one way, and having done 1 year as a flower farmer does not make you an expert. Anyway, what do you think were the biggest mistakes you made in your first couple of seasons? Just pick one if you want, just an example.
I was going to say, how long have you got? I think when I think back, there were two things. One of which is I made the classic mistake, and I, of all people, should really give myself a good slapping around this, is not having the clear view about where the customers are going to buy the flowers. It's kind of classic. I fell into
marketing.
I will build it. They will come. So that I did fall into that. And I think I understand why that is now. Partly, I think it's because when you go into a new industry, it's kind of like you're so vulnerable in that new industry and learning everything that goes on. You kind of forget everything you already knew and you forget to apply it. But anyway, that was my rationale on that. I was kind of still in the startup phase. But in truth, I think the other big mistake I made was that I just expanded my growing space way too quickly. Tried to do too much too quickly. As a one-woman band, you've got to pace yourself to do it. And I was the classic kind of out there, go, go, go. And where I grow now predominantly is very different from where I started because it's much more practical. I just took every pocket of land I could. And I think what I was trying to do, Joe, is I didn't want a flower farm.
Yeah.
Really?
You wanted a landscape. Yeah.
I wanted cutting gardens, and that's a beautiful idea. But the practicalities of that can be a little bit overwhelming. So those were my two big mistakes.
Did you ever get to the point where you were so overwhelmed in that first couple of seasons when you thought this might not work?
Not really, because I know that having a flower business could work. I just need to figure out how it could work for me. And that's taken time. Longer than I would like, but I always consider myself a slow learner sometimes.
But I actually love that phrase that you just said, that you knew it could work, you just had to figure out how it could work for you. And I think that's absolute gold. If you went slightly further and you were starting from scratch again tomorrow, what would you do differently?
There are two ways to look at this. I think if I was starting today, I wouldn't probably grow flowers. I would grow foliage. And in fact, I had brought a friend to visit, and they wanted to start a flower farm, and they were so excited. They said, well, where do you think I should start? And I said, if it were me, I would go into foliage. That's what I think I do now, partly because it's more doable at my stage and physicality. That said, if I started over back in 2016, I would not start on my own. I would either set it up in a way that I could employ people earlier, or better still, in truth, I love the idea of creating a flower farming kind of collective collaboration partnership where you get a number of people who are committed to flower farming working together on a piece of land rather than try and do it on their own. I saw when I was over in Australia in March, and they had a place there, and people growing veggies, people growing flowers. But what was so amazing is that they were starting to work together. And I think that just sheds the stress, the load, the risk, and
the infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's all those things that you don't buy because you don't individually need them often enough to put the money out for a seeder or a tiller or a tilther or any of those things. But if there's people sharing those costs, wow, wouldn't that just be awesome? Buying in your compost and things, and you're just going, yeah, we can buy 5 cubic meters because there's 10 of us here to use it, not one. So we can get a better price for the compost, which means we can get a better profit on our flowers.
Yeah, totally.
I love that idea. Many of the topics we're going to cover in the next couple of questions are discussed quite deeply in sessions held by the Floral Business Activators. Now, we lovingly refer to it as the FBA because it's a lot easier to say than Floral Business Activator. So tell us a little bit how you see the FBA, and tell us what you want it to be able to do for flower farmers.
I think it's two things. One of it is that it's a place for information or knowledge about the business side of flower farming. And what it is that we aim to translate what is general generic business advice and apply it into the flower farming setting. So it's not just, here's a budget template. It's like, well, here's a budget template and here's some of the things you should think about what might go into your budget, like compost and seeds and bulbs and things. And I know that sounds quite basic, but it's quite amazing how just having those business tools in a language that's meaningful to the trade you're in, which is flower farming, that makes a big difference for people, I think. So that's what we aim to do, to try and give some good business tools and translate them into the flower farming setting. But I think the truth of it is that it's a community of flower farmers. And I know community is banded around as some sort of like utopia, but I think it's more than just like-minded people coming together. I think the people that stay in the FBA stay because they've made friends, like
Yes.
really deep relationships with people that go way beyond what the FBA is about, really. Some of them have gone into business collaboration. Some of them are just on the end of a phone or a messenger or what have you. I think people come in the first place for the information, but they stay
Yes.
for the relationships that exist. That's what we're trying to create.
As an insider and a member, I would agree completely. I came for the information. I've stayed for the community, and because not only can I share the information with people, but I learn, even though my flower farm is very different from everybody else's in the FBA. But that doesn't stop it being my community and my go-to. So we will put the links and everything for the FBA in the show notes. But a little bit that Julie's not telling you that I'll tell you so that you feel quite comfortable. If you're a beginner flower farmer, it's not the place where you will feel overwhelmed, because there's sessions for newbies, as they're lovingly called, and for experienced growers. So there's space there for everybody. And that's what makes it the community. Don't feel as though you need to be experienced to think about the FBA. It's a great place for the newbies as well. So there's my plug for the FBA.
Thanks, Jo. And I think what I like about the FBA is that, everybody is welcome. I mean, I think it does take a certain type of person to be a good fit for what's in the FBA. There are a lot of really smart people. They're not smarty pants. We haven't got a lot of people that are going, oh, well, I know, so my way's the right way. But I think they're people who think things through. And if they don't understand, they just figure it out.
Yeah.
People who come to the FBA don't want hand-holding. They are often transitioning from another career or another life or circumstance. And so they're driven and determined enough to figure things out for themselves. That would be my take. The only one that's a little more exclusive just by the timing is we have a specific group for our Aussie members, and that's a bit later in the evening. But what's fascinating, and I don't know, Jo, whether you've had a chance to listen to any of the Australian conversations, is they are a little bit different from the ones with the Kiwis. Let's say a little more direct is probably the best way of putting it.
I've got a few questions for you about the business side of flower farming. What do you think most flower farmers misunderstand about profit?
I think quite simplistically, people think money in, money out in terms of actual expenses. So revenue coming in, so money that people pay them for their flowers and what they pay out of their business to grow the flowers. And often the bit that's missing is how much they pay themselves. They don't cost in their time and energy and effort that goes into it. Now, look, none of us got into this to be millionaires because, this is just not a business where you're going to make a massive amount of money, but it is a business where you can pay yourself.
Yes.
At least a living wage, if not more, depending on what you're doing in your business. So I think that often people miss the point about the difference between revenue and profit, but also the profit is what comes after you've paid yourself. Or I do know a lot of people that will take whatever is left after they've taken their expenses from their revenue and then pay themselves out of the profit. And I'm okay with that methodology, as long as it's enough to pay you. It's not, oh, I've got $5,000 left once, my profit is $5,000. So I'm paying myself $5,000 for working, I don't know, 50 hours a week in the summer and, probably the same over winter. That I think is tricky for me to understand why people would do that.
Do you think that's different from other startup businesses, that flower farmers don't think of paying themselves?
Possibly. I think that there are a lot of us who feel like the joy of what we do is pay enough.
You can't go to the supermarket and say, oh, I love cooking, please give me my food for free.
Well, it's true, but I did a lot of work in the startup scene in Wellington. They didn't get paid when they first started because that was part of their investment into the business. But it was sure as hell that they had to generate a business model that paid not just them, but built a company.
Yeah.
And so that is a very different mentality. I think everybody starting a business puts in a lot of what I call sweat equity.
Yes.
I think for flower farmers, whether we allow too much sweat equity in our business, that's probably questionable.
Or allow the sweat equity for too long. I can understand as you set up that you put the sweat equity in, but then once you're at the point of selling, then I think sweat equity has to stop and payment has to come in for yourself, for your time and your effort.
It does. And I mean, it's interesting you say that, Joe, because there are ways that you can start to look at your business, cutting out waste, only doing things that you really value, using time saving and using your time effectively. So the whole amount of effort we put in, you've got to be aware of what's going on and not just do it for the love of it or the fact that you need to pay yourself for every hour, but you can actually develop a business where you just don't waste your time and your energy on stuff that isn't valuable to anybody, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it completely does. When people are thinking about profit, do you think that they tend to not think about all the hidden costs of what they're doing, particularly when it comes to overheads, the rates, the insurance, the mortgage, the water rates, power, internet, all of those things which don't have a relevance to that stem that you've just picked?
People seem to be very clear about what they spend in terms of seeds and actually the growing side of it. But no, the insurance, the marketing, the administrative overhead, paying for an accountant or Xero or whatever the accounting system you might use, even having to pay for your Google account if you're running a business. I think that you need to have the tools that allow you to do that really well. But that costs money. It's not massive, but it's still a cost.
Yeah. But do you think it's possible to make a full-time income from flower farming?
That's a very interesting question because I think to answer that, you have to understand what people's definition of a full-time income is. So, for example, I have done one-to-one sessions with people who are in pretty senior executive roles who might be earning upwards of $150,000 a year in paid employment. And I say, what is your goal with all of this? And they say, well, I want to replace my current salary with flower farming.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm laughing. Okay.
So,
whoa. Okay.
Then it's like, well, if that is what you're trying to do, then you are going to be creating a very different business from somebody that says, I would like to earn X amount of money. And that might be 1,000 or 60,000 or 30,000. I think there aren't many flower farmers that are doing it full-time. Well, they're actually working full-time, but it's not a full-time business. They're often doing it alongside something else. So their salary from their flower farm might be one component and their part-time job might be another, and together that might give them a whole-time salary, if that makes sense.
I all agree with you that a lot of growers have another income, and it may not be even an off-farm income. It can be that they diversify what they are doing with their flowers, whether it be dried flowers or workshops or selling seeds, selling roots of plants. Flower farming is so seasonal that we feel we need to fill that space to equalise the income over the whole year. So people work towards doing that one way or another.
Yeah, and diversification is important for every business because relying on one income stream is a risky strategy. But I think the point you make is a good one, because I think if I grow a flower or a number of flowers and sell those, is that enough to make a rounded business? I would say probably not, because you have to add value to what you're growing to make it give you enough of a return back. So if you grow a flower and sell it for what it's cost you to grow it and nothing else, then that's not a profitable business. So it's all about adding value to what you're growing. And there are some growers that decide they don't want to add the value. So they grow it and pass it on at the minimum cost. And so they're just looking to sell at a commodity rate, if I can call it that, as opposed to what the micro businesses, small businesses, which is what we're largely working in. You need to add value. because the business model at a small scale just doesn't work any other way. By its very nature, commodity growing is high volume, low price, as opposed to what I think most small businesses need. Because they're small, you can't get the scale, is that you need to have that added value built in. And you'll see it in tradies or cafes or anything, that if they try to sell at the lowest possible price, it's just not sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, they're gone quite quickly. So it's financial burnout as much as physical and mental burnout, which could make the difference. So what do you think then separates a profitable flower farm from a struggling flower farm? Is it stepping back to look at those things?
Depends where the struggle's coming. If it's a financial struggle, it's largely down to either costs or pricing. If people are struggling because they can't cope with the amount of work, that's a different scenario. And there are ways of getting around that, because you could employ people to do some of the work, but you need to build the cost of that into the business itself. Fundamentally, it does come down to really understanding how the money stacks up. And if it doesn't stack up, then you have to accept that you're doing this for that sweat equity and the joy and the love.
So why do you think, in your mind, that growers often underprice their flowers?
Partly, I think they don't understand the actual value of them in the marketplace. And sometimes it's they don't have the confidence to charge that value out. And I completely understand what that's like. I think with flower farming, we struggle with understanding the value in monetary terms. And I think one of the simplest things that people can do to understand that is buy flowers from somebody else. It doesn't matter whether I buy them from you, Joe, I will understand much more intimately what the value of my own flowers are. It's the only way I know how to do that is actually go and buy somebody else's flowers and think, are they good value for money or not? Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point. And it may be that for some people, they get into flower farming because they want to make flowers more affordable. And I hear that a lot.
Do you?
I think, yeah, I do hear that a lot. There was a point at which I kind of had a little bit of that mentality as well. And the reason is that they're comparing what they do and what they might sell at with what a florist charges for their flowers. So I think for you and I, it's different now. If somebody came along and they said they wanted to spend $100 on a bunch of flowers, we'd go, okay, cool. And we'd put together $100 bouquet, and whatever $100 worth of flowers in there, probably not. But when you start out, you think $100 of flowers, that's like, that would be 100 stems or 70 stems or 60 stems. But you and I know, because we've come through the journey of understanding that value base and how that, your customer, they go, I want $100 of flowers. That's what they're prepared to pay.
Yeah.
And what they get looks like a $200 bouquet that a florist might put together.
That's partly the skill of the grower and the flower farmer florist, isn't it? It's understanding what your customer wants. They want a bouquet that looks like it came from a flower farm. As a lot of customers say, wildflowers, which I'm sorry, that drives me nuts because they're not wild and they've taken a lot of effort to grow. But they want something that looks natural and free-flowing and full of their vision, which is where they put the value on it, is their vision, isn't it?
They do. And that comes on to the thing that not just valuing your own flowers, but you have to get into that space that you've said, which is you have to get into the business jargon of it, is the transformation that your flowers create. So in marketing terms, we talk about features and benefits, and the new jargon in the modern world of marketing is it's all about transformation. And what I mean by that is a flower is a feature. It is a physical thing and it looks nice. The benefit is that people think they're buying a thing of beauty. The transformation is how it makes them feel and what it says to them about their own sense of self and identity. And these are very nuanced. It's all psychology. The feel-good factor, the transformation you make in somebody's life, that's what we've got to really get to. And that's quite sophisticated business thinking, but it comes with practice over time. You understand the difference between somebody who wants a cheap and cheerful and somebody who wants something that's very different.
But whichever of those it is, cheap and cheerful or different, you're still selling them joy. And that's the transformational part of it, isn't it? And that's fantastic for the flower farmer as well, because they get the benefit of seeing what their work has done for somebody else.
Liz and I, who run a market stall together, we get a lot of people that come for flowers for the cemetery. And, our concern is, have you got something to put the flowers in? Are they going to drop dead an hour after you walk away from placing them at the graveside? That doesn't matter to the person that's buying them. What they are getting is an opportunity to have a moment to honor the person. The transformation is those flowers just give them something symbolic to hold on to that says, I love you, or I miss you, or I wish you were here, or here's your favorite flower. You can't have it for real, but I'm bringing it to you. Flowers mean different things to different people. And I think that the most successful flower farmers get that nuance, and they get that what they're offering people at different points is different. So what you're offering to a bride is different from somebody who's doing funeral flowers to somebody who's buying a cheap and cheerful grab and go, to somebody who wants something just a little bit of a higher price point, because that says something like, I want to spend more than $30 on my flowers. Yeah. My weekly budget is 45 or 50. And everybody's got different take on it, because there are no customers that are equal. And flower farmers need to decide who are the customers they're going to serve, because that sets the benchmark for everything.
You said that you work with Liz at it's a Brewtown market, isn't it? That's where you operate from.
Yeah.
That's your way of helping with time management, having somebody else to share that load. But what point do you think growers should be thinking about outsourcing tasks or hiring help? What triggers that?
Well, for me, it's been like, I physically can't do everything without exhausting myself. And I think, we've all been through periods of burnout, one shape or another, whether it's 1 week or whether you end up at a season, you're completely frazzled by it all. But again, I think it comes back to that concept of value. It is, what is the most valuable use of your time? And as a business owner, you've got so many things you need to think about. And therefore, actually, is the weeding the best use of your time? In terms of flower farming, it's an essential thing to do. But should you be doing that, or could you be paying a enthusiastic person who is a very good weeder to do that while you get on and do something much more important?
Sell their product. Yeah. That's such a big decision to make, though, to bring on paid staff, isn't it?
I think we make it a bigger decision than it actually is. Because if you look around in the wider business world, hiring people is, the thing that most people look forward to. Like, how quickly can I employ somebody to take this off my hands?
Do the horrible jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we think they're horrible. I couldn't possibly hand off my rubbish jobs to somebody else. It's like, hang on, hello, the rest of the world does that. The chef doesn't do their own washing up.
And they'll be getting paid.
So again, I think it's a case of figuring out what is going to work best for you. And I've had help weeding and harvesting, and both of them made such a difference. You just price that into the bucket. You price the cost of the picking into the bucket. And that's often the thing that people don't price in. They don't price in the time it takes to pick the bucket of flowers. They just think that's the flowers. Well, that's true. But have you added in not just the cost of growing, but the cost of picking it, and the cost of packing it, and the cost of getting it to the customer? And so what might look like $50 for a bucket of flowers, the true cost with some profit is probably close to $150 or higher.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. And not one that we are always very good at. Don't underprice your product. There's Julie's tip for the day.
Believe me, Jo, I have been through the journey pricing myself. I started like that in flowers. Now I'm like, that has to be that way. And it's partly a cost profitability issue, but it's also how you are perceived by your customers in the marketplace. Do you want to be perceived as a cheap and cheerful option and be known for that? Or do you want to be known as a quality flower that comes direct from the farm?
That's really interesting. The whole marketing thing is such, not just a mindset, but a learning curve. And I think that flower farmers as a whole need to work on their whole attitude to marketing. I'm including myself in this. I'm saying that it is the thing that I struggle with the most, the marketing. But I will say, somebody emailed me yesterday asking for budget wedding flowers, and I said, no.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to hear that.
Was so offended. She came to me because she wanted budget wedding flowers. I'll give you flowers that are great quality and value, but I'm not targeting budget. Grow your own. Then learn what value is and budget is.
That's
Sorry.
true. Here's a top tip if that ever happens again, Joe. But yeah, tell me what your budget is, and then I can tell you what you can have for your budget.
That's a very good tip.
Most people are exposed to what I refer to as commodity flowers, which is the cheap and cheerful at the supermarket, rather than what we offer them, which is top grade flowers, too often at cheap and cheerful prices.
That wonderful point. We'll take a short break to hear from our sponsors, but when we come back, Julie and I will talk more about the Floral Business Activator and what it can do for flower farmers. Love the growing but over the constant hustle for buyers? Our partners at Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers can help with that. Juggling dozens of tiny retail accounts or losing your weekend selling at the local market takes time and energy. By partnering with Fresh Cut, you get instant access to florists and supermarkets nationwide. Selling wholesale means a reliable income, and the best part, you get your time back. Simplify your business and focus on what you do best, growing gorgeous blooms. There's excitement ahead with big ideas blooming, but why not visit Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers at wholesaleflowers.nz to see how easy it is to become a supplier. Fresh Cut, established in 1992, evolving for tomorrow. Now back to the show. We're going to talk again with Julie from the FBA, or the Floral Business Activator, about what the FBA can do for flower farmers. So you talked earlier about what made you start the FBA, was that learning but also the community. But within the FBA, do you target particular topics or anything that you want growers to learn so that they can grow their farm?
The world of business is changing all the time, so it's trying to keep up with what is the latest thinking. What I hope people get from the FBA is they get the fundamentals. They get a process and some tools that they can apply to their own farm. We do not tell people how to set up their flower farm. We don't tell them that this is what they should charge. We don't tell them that they should market themselves. We make it such that people do have to figure this out. We're there to help them and answer questions, but fundamentally it starts with, what the heck are you doing this for in the first place? Understanding that. And are you in it to start a business, or are you in it to do something else? And some people, even being able to answer that question really early in their career is enough for them to leave the FBA, because they've realized that they don't want to build a flower farm. What they did want is just to grow cut flowers and maybe sell
Enjoy
a few at
them.
the gate. Yeah.
I loved your latest podcast on the FBA about knowing your why, because it does guide so many other things, doesn't it?
It does. And when you get a bit lost, coming back to that is a good place to be. What the heck am I doing this for? And I don't know about you, but that pops up into my head sometimes to think, hang on a minute here. And it's just a momentary kind of, but that's an anchor point. So yeah, going from what it means to you personally, then building out, for want of a better word, a business model. And what I mean by that is, who are your customers? What are you going to be known for? How are you going to get your flowers to your customers? And how do you create this financial model that means that you're going to pay yourself and have some profit to hopefully invest back or take away to have a holiday in Fiji, whatever you want to spend your profit on. But then it goes into more detailed topics like crop planning, so that you're going to be growing the most profitable crops, or the crops that your customers will want to buy, the crops that are in demand, and the crops that you're growing that suit your climate. And then Christie's real passion, which is this lean flower farming, which fascinates me, about how you can do more with less, and that you can make your little business seem like it's much more efficient. And then the whole marketing side, which is a side that I love. But the world of marketing is changing so much. The fundamentals are still the same, but there's modern marketing, which in my opinion is, you really need to understand the psychology of customers, which big businesses have been doing for years, but even small businesses need to do it now. Putting yourself in the shoes of your customer is quite a hard thing to do. Unless you're talking to them regularly.
Yeah, it's dissociating yourself to make yourself think how they think, isn't it? It is complex.
I think you've been doing markets for a very long time. You would understand your market customers intimately because you're talking to them in the same way that you'd understand your customers that turn up to your bloom bar or the people that come to your workshop, you get really close to your customers. I think for some of us in flower farms, we're a little bit detached from our customers, partly because we're not selling directly to them. We might be selling via a cafe or a shop. And so you might get to know the cafe and the shop really well, but do you really know their customers that are buying your flowers?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Even the people that buy off your gate stall, I'm not sure that people really truly understand who their customers are actually buying them.
Like you say, I've sold at farmers markets for many years, and you get to find out the why, and you know your regulars. But when you don't know who's buying your flowers, gosh, I struggle with that one. I really do. It's weird. I'm a weird person, really, but that's
you're not.
fine.
I mean, it's. I mean, unless you're literally going to stand there and talk to the people turn up, which of course is, not really
not going to happen. That would make them very valuable. All my time that went into that if I stood around and waited. So what are some of the common challenges that growers would bring to the FBA? And I would say marketing.
Yep, definitely marketing. Often it's the social media side of marketing.
Funny that.
Yeah. And I think that the interesting thing is that social media is probably the least effective way of marketing to customers that you want that, because the landscape of social media has changed so much.
Yes.
I'm learning more and more about this at the moment in order that as we go through the coming weeks and months, I can impart what I'm learning. But fundamentally, you're better off investing in having a really good website. It doesn't need to be all whistles and bells, but having a place online that you can call your own, and having a newsletter or an email list that you can talk to.
Newsletter. And it's so simple to do these days. There's so many formats that you can use that don't have to be expensive. Many of them are free and you can get to your customers, but it's your list. It's not the algorithm telling you who's going to see when or what. And it's the when. You can't advertise a workshop on social media and expect people to see your adverts in time to book, because it may be a week before they see it and your workshop's full. It's just so frustrating. And yet my newsletter, great, love it. So easy to do.
So that's definitely, I think we put too much emphasis on social media, or have recently. And I think that it's time to kind of pull back on that. I'm trying to think what other questions. Occasionally people come up with pricing. Pricing's a difficult one for people to talk about, partly because, there is all sorts of consumer law that prevents us from appearing to be telling people they should be pricing. But that does come up. And I think also what comes up is people are faced with a particular situation. So they might come in and say, hey, I've had this person email me. They want to buy my flowers and I can't sell them at the price they want. What do I do, kind of thing? And if you're a new person, never faced with that situation before, that's a legitimate question to ask. And so people will pile in with their point of view on it. So there can be very kind of particular situations on things. But largely it's marketing, money, and how do I get through the stresses and strains? There are times when people are just like at their wits' end and they're looking for people to cheer them up a bit, really. It's like, what can I do to feel less stressed about this?
But I also think, from my point of view, when I go into the FBA, I like to see how people have resolved issues. So within the community, somebody has answered a question. One person might have answered it, 5 people might have answered it. They may have 5 different answers, but at least it gives you a point. If you're having the same issue, you can then research what's going to work better for you. You get that starting point. And I find that really interesting. Yeah. And particularly when you look at the spread of growers across the country and the different conditions that we all grow in.
I think the quality of questions over time really improves, because the more specific the question is, the better the examples they get from other people. They're not kind of random, what should I grow kind of questions. I think in the FBA, because people know each other better and they do have a frame of reference as well sometimes.
This is somebody I trust. Yeah.
And your answer might be different to mine and to other people's.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the FBA and what it can do for growers, but how do people get to be a part of the FBA or Floral Business Activator?
We traditionally open our doors once a year, and that's usually around now, but we're a bit slow off the mark this year because we're doing some reshaping. There's been some changes on the way that our hosting platform works. But fundamentally, we open the doors, and mostly the people that join are people that are waiting to join. So getting on a wait list is the simplest way. And then you're the first in the queue. I'm expecting, if all goes to plan, that we'll be opening again for new members in August this year. So just before
Perfect.
we get into the spring side of things. But the truth of it is if people are really champing at the bit, they're like, I need the FBA more than anything else in my life right now. They just need to flick me an email and we can see what we can do to help. And sometimes that's actually pointing them in a direction to an article on a blog or maybe one of our downloadable tools that's there already. And that's enough to get them satisfied for now, because we're not good for everybody. We embrace beginners and seasoned growers, but the FBA is really for people who are good at figuring out things for themselves and determined to make something of what they're doing. They don't give up at the first hurdle. That's my impression about people that stick with the FBA. I think, if people are ready and waiting and wanting to get on, then get on the wait list or drop me an email, and happy to chat about doing that.
And we will put all of those contacts in the show notes so that you can do that fairly easily. Now I'm going to put Julie on the spot and put her through a rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready? On your marks, get set, go.
Go.
Favourite flower to grow?
Favourite flower to grow. Do you know, I've really enjoyed growing Lysianthus. It changes over time, but I really did enjoy growing Lysianthus this year. That's the one I enjoyed most.
Most profitable crop?
Easily, hands down, things like the cresses or Nigella, because you can chuck them in the ground and they are highly valuable.
Yeah. They certainly are. And both of them, which makes them even more valuable, are great fresh or dried. So anything that's multi-purpose like that is always going to make a crop more profitable. Most overrated crop?
Don't shoot me down, people. I think dahlias are a bit overrated. As a cut flower, for me, I think they're a bit overrated. I can see why people can build a profitable business around dahlias. And I can understand why people get nuts about them. But for me, cut flower, I'm not so sure.
It's interesting though, isn't it? And we're branching out as we always do. For people who grow dahlias for profit, is the profit coming from the cut flower or the sale of the tuber? And I believe it's the tuber.
Hands down the tuber. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Okay, most underrated crop then?
I think foliage and fillers, because I think that they're underrated. They can do an awful lot to make your flowers look amazing, and it can really add value into the product for a lower cost base.
And because a lot of foliage doesn't have to be picked today. It can be picked tomorrow or the next day or whatever. Plant foliage, people, shrubs, flowering shrubs, just different coloured leaf shrubs, variety and volume. Make it a great big hedge all around your flower farm, but plant foliage.
Yes, definitely, I'd agree with that. And it's very expensive to buy in as well.
But a lot of shrubs can be grown from cuttings and from layering and things like that. You know, there's ways around huge expense. Like a lot of the viburnums will grow from cuttings. The 9-barks will grow from cuttings really easily. They're not protected by plant variety rights. So you can have a whole hedge of different coloured 9-barks that you can pick and pick and pick. And the stems are a good colour. You can even use the stems over winter.
That's true. So, yeah, and it's one of those things you've got to have your head in the long-term game as an investment. Yeah.
Yep, that's what they are. One business book, not flower farming book, business book every grower should read.
Do you know, if I was to pick one, I think that the books that Seth Godin writes about marketing are really useful. And he talks about it in a very intelligent way. And I think he talks about it in a way that's useful for small businesses. So anything by Seth Godin. And actually, this is a flower farming business book. Not sure whether that's allowed, Joe, but Lenny Larkin's book on flower farm for profit, I think is a good read. And I find myself nodding a lot in her books. I think some of it is
her terminology.
Well, actually, I think it's part of the problem, and this is per se with a lot of advice that's out there about flower farming is A, it's in the Northern Hemisphere, and B, it's only relevant if you live near a massive concentrated population of people.
Thank you for saying that. That would probably be my top business tip to flower farmers or people in New Zealand who want to set up a flower farm. Do not expect to be able to move the volume of flowers that they talk about in parts of the UK and the US, where they are near massive centres of people who live in houses or apartment blocks and don't have gardens. Many Kiwis still have gardens of one size or another. They can grow flowers, so you have to grow better flowers to be above what they can grow or sell to people who don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, it's absolutely spot on. I know a lot of growers in the UK, and I mean, there are some that are kind of in rural areas, but there's still a lot of big urban populations in the UK that just don't exist in New Zealand. I have come to the view that I think this is a very particular challenge for Australia and New Zealand. You know, there are some people that are close to the big concentrated cities in Australia, but largely people are not. They're building their farms in more rural settings, and that's requires a whole different way of thinking.
One thing you wished you had invested in sooner?
Oh, it's a toss-up between a van, which we traded in a second car for a van last year, and I could not do what I'm doing now without that van. I really was not doing well without it. So probably that still stands, although I bought a second-hand big deep, not a drinks fridge, but it was a big catering double deep. I can get like six buckets on the bottom. So it's not a chiller, but it's a fridge, and that really helps as well. So I don't store flowers long term, but it's enough to kind of keep them fresh and just give you that wiggle room. So I quite like my little fridge as well. So if I can have two things, I'd have a van and a big fridge.
Okay,
or a
you can have two.
chiller.
Best $100 or less that you've spent on your business?
I think it was a coaching session with a flower farmer florist in the UK.
Awesome.
And she should have been charging a lot more money for it.
Take that as another win. Not only did you learn, you got it at a good price.
Yes. Learning from other people, I think, is so invaluable. You can read all the books, dare I say, you can listen to all the podcasts in the world, but actually having a one-to-one conversation with somebody about your particular circumstance is just absolute gold. And we do a little bit of that in the FBA, but being able to spend that $100 on this one particular problem that I needed to help with really helped.
Awesome. Final question for you, and this is the one. What hard truth do flower farmers need to hear?
What hard truth? I think the hard truth is that if you want to make a business from flower farming, you have to be good at doing business. You have to get your business side of things cracked. And I'm not saying you've got to go to Harvard and get an MBA, but what I am saying is you've got to get your fundamentals and be prepared to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Now, I know you do that. I know, you're always learning, Joe. And, if marketing is your, thing that you struggle with, you're not going to sit back and go, I can't do it. But there are people that do that. And I think that's the hard truth, is that growing flowers is just a small percentage of running a flower farming business.
Well, there you go, folks. You've heard it all from Julie from the FBA. There is so much information there for you to take on board. So whether you're a newbie or an experienced grower, there's the spot for you at the FBA if it suits your style of learning, and it is a great community. So I just want to say thank you to Julie, because she has guided a lot of my marketing and taught me to introduce myself as a business. We had a sample group of FBA members who did Julie's first marketing course, and she said it wasn't an elevator pitch, it was just an introduction. And we all said we're flower farmers, and she said, no, you need to tell people your business is flower farm. And it's that different of mindset to go from you are just a flower farmer to your business is flower farming was massive. So my thanks to Julie and the FBA for that. And more to you, Julie, for taking the time to be here today. It's been amazing.
And I thank you, Jo, not just for this, but you bring a massive amount of value into the FBA. So your experience, and it is a give and take. I appreciate your time. And I've loved this conversation. We should do it more often.
We should. Thanks, Julie. To stay in the loop, follow Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers on Instagram. Their Insta feed is a place for behind-the-scenes looks and a sneak peek of what's blooming next. Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers, established in 1992, evolving for tomorrow. That's it for this episode, Petals. I'm Jo Robinson and I'm signing off until next time, knowing that if we work together, we'll keep the New Zealand floral industry growing and flourishing.